Thanks everybody for coming. My name's Glenn Block. I work on the .NET Framework team. I work on this thing called the Managed Extensibility Framework. We're going to talk a bit about that today. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you guys a couple of questions. In your RIA app development, how many of you have been encountering challenges about how you package up your apps, how you deploy them, how you deal with adding new functionality? Anybody here encountering any of those problems as they're building their applications? And what about like add-ins, plugins, things like that? Do you have needs where as you're building your apps, you're thinking about, well, how can we make it really easy to add new types of things to our applications? Is that something that resonates well with you? Cool. So I think you're going to enjoy this talk then. Let's just take a quick summary or a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is you know them by many names: extensions, plugins, add-ins, etc. Talk about what that means in the context of a rich internet application. Is it something that's even important? Does it make sense? Why? We're going to talk about implanting extensibility. That means you don't have to rewrite your entire application. You got a bunch of surgeons ready there waiting for you that you can use to just go surgically into different parts of your app and say, I want to make this easier to add new things to. That is, if you're convinced that that's something that you need to do. And the third thing we're going to talk about, which becomes particularly important in the RIA space, is how do we take our apps and slim them down? Because when our apps start getting big, that means that there's the response time goes down. When we're building RIA applications, we want people to get going really, really fast. But also, how do we just make them easier to maintain? So with that, let's take a little bit of scenario here. Sally developer, she's building her rich internet application version 1.0. She ships the app, it's great. Suddenly customers start coming in and saying, hey, we need this, we need some new functionality to be added. And then she's like, great, I'll just bolt that on. And then requests just keep coming in. And as those requests are coming in, the app just keeps getting more and more bloated, both from a maintainability standpoint, because things are just getting layered on top and mashed together. But even more important is the fact that the size of the package keeps growing, which means that's going to impact the response time. So one of the ways to address this problem is to allow you to decouple the components of your application. And that's really what the Managed Extensibility Framework is about. It's a new framework that we're delivering in Silverlight 4 that allows you to build applications that can be incrementally enhanced and extended. And this is not just talking about at compile time, the fact that you can add new things in to an application after it's been deployed, but it's also talking about that while an application is running, I'll show you later today how you can have new functionality that shows up after the app is already going along its way. Now in the desktop we've shown this and it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of cool, but I can just restart my app. The problem, though, when you do that in the RIA space is you're now downloading all that stuff again anyway. So the idea here is I can start off with a really small footprint, and then as I'm going, depending on what I'm doing, new things will get delivered to me. So let's talk quickly about a set of basics, and then we're going to dive into code. So we showed this image of all of these different things layered on top of each other, and very tightly coupled mess, a ball of mud. Ball of mud driven, you know, BDD, you've heard about behavioral driven development. This is like ball of mud driven development. How can we make that better? Well, the nice thing about Legos is that they're very easy to snap apart, pull together, reuse. And so what MEF is really doing is saying, take your system and break them up into these things called parts. You can almost think of parts like Legos. And because you have those Legos, it's going to be really easy and flexible for you to add new ones, to move them around, to have different sets that deploy based on the configuration of the user. So your apps become built of these things called parts. I'm just going to show you a very quick demo, and then we're going to talk about how it's built, and then we're actually going to build it. So here's our classic Hello World. This is Hello MEF. The important thing that I'm showing here is this is a dashboard. Think of this as a dashboard. I've got an existing application. I want to plug a dashboard in it. And that dashboard can have different kinds of widgets that get added to it. In this case, I have a widget that's a button. I have a widget that's a text box. I have reserved areas in my UI where those things are going to go, but that's not the most important thing. What's important is the fact that I have these different widgets, and they have some kind of information that lets me place them where I want to place them. Okay. We're going to talk about the basics, the basic core concepts you need to know to work with MEF. And we're going to talk about 5 things. There's 5 essential things you need to know, right? You can count it. It's real easy. You can count the 5 fingers of your hand. We're going to start off with 3. The 3 are the absolute essentials. The 2 take you to the next level. There's a lot more than that. But one of the things we've thought about with MEF, we've put a lot of time and effort into this on the framework team, is to give you a scale up from complexity, where you pay for play. You can start off really easy, just get going, and then as you want to do more, it's easy to turn it up, but that complexity doesn't hit you until you decide that you need it. That's not easy to do, and that's why these APIs actually take quite a bit of time, a lot more time designing them than actually writing the code. The 3 concepts that we're going to talk about now is exporting, importing, and composing. The idea in MEF is everything is these parts, and parts can offer things up. In the example that I showed, I had a screen with widgets. Each of those widgets can be an export. I'm offering up a widget. That is an export. Here's something that I'm offering. Normally in MEF, you're offering many of a thing, not just one. But you can also offer one. You might have a thing traditionally you think of as a service, like a logger. Or it could even be simple things like strings. But in general, it's really around the collections that's the most interesting thing. And in MEF, the way I do that is in a declarative form. How many people here have worked, say, with Office Extensibility? And how much work would you consider it to write an add-in? Was it easy, moderate, hard? Why? Give me the top 2 reasons. Okay, yeah, so there's a lot of different APIs that you have to work with, and there's also a lot of registration type code that you're authoring to say, I want to make this add-in available. I'm going to have to do a lot of explicit wiring through code and say, here it is, and I have to know about all the various APIs that are there. MEF has taken more of a declarative approach, which says you shouldn't have to do that work. We know you want to do it. Let's just provide a way for you to do it, and that's in a declarative fashion. So when I'm saying I have an export that's available, I'm going to do that simply through an attribute, and we'll show you how that works. The second part of the equation is import. Import is I need something. And again, I said the collections are the more interesting thing, because here we have a collection of widgets. I don't want just one. There's one-to-many that might show up. And so with MEF, when we do importing, we can import a single thing, or we can import a collection. And we also allow you to even distinguish those different things. We'll get into that a bit later. Finally, there's a composition. Composition means that now I've got all these different things available. MEF knows what those things are. Put them together. And putting them together is what you're seeing in that UI that I showed. Putting together means that this UI now has discovered these widgets, put them on the screen, everything's ready to go. And that's called composition. Let's take a quick run through of what I mean here and show you the declarative model and how simple that is to use. So here I have a widget. It's just a user control. I want to make that user control available. So in MEF, I use this export attribute. Now, by default, I don't have to specify a type. Here you notice I've specified a type. The reason is because by default, this guy would be exported as widget 1. Well, that would kind of be self-defeating because the application's not supposed to know what's coming. It doesn't know to look for widget 1. It just knows to look for widgets. So in this case, I've chosen just to export it as a user control. If I wanted to, I can do more than that. I can create a custom interface. But going back to the simplicity, I don't have to. User control is a ready available thing. If I want to use that, I can, which is what I'm doing here. Now this guy also has needs. He's got a message that he wants to pull in. So there's somebody else in the ether is going to provide a message that this guy needs. So the way he declares that is he simply puts an import. Now if I just do this, by default we'll be looking for an import of string. But because string is such a common type, it's likely that there might be many strings that I want to be able to distinguish. So with MEF, what you can do is you can use contracts. Actually, we're not bound to type. The type is just a convenience that we render to a contract behind the scenes. So I can arbitrarily name my own contracts that make sense to me. In this case, I've said I'm going to be looking for a thing called hellomef.message. If I want to, I can use constants and other things to represent that so it's not loose. And we also have ways of hardening that up, which I'll show you in a bit. The other side of the equation, though, is the page that's going to be looking for the widgets. Now, that guy needs to find many. So he's using an import many. He's specifying the type that he wants. As a matter of fact, I didn't need to do that. I'm just showing you that you can do that explicitly. All I need there is an import many attribute, and we can derive from the fact that the type is user control. That user control is what we're going to use for the contract. So this is really the bridge. This is what I need to do from a MEF perspective to create something simple like that widget app that we just saw. The last step is the composition. Anybody here work with MEF in the desktop? So MEF actually does ship in .NET Framework 4. It's not just for Silverlight. Actually, it came for the framework first. Yet the framework hasn't shipped yet, so along the way, we've been able to develop a Silverlight version. Go figure. The important thing is, on the desktop, there's quite a bit of work you do initially to get set up, setting up your host. And what we wanted to do in MEF in Silverlight is say that you shouldn't have to do that host work. We want MEF to just be there whenever you need it. You know, I had talks with Harry Pearson, who worked on the IronPython team, and he said that one of the principles we have in IronPython is whenever you want to do something, you've got everything you need to just do it. Probably tore that up. But basically saying, I don't have to go through a lot of ceremony suddenly to be able to do something. So what we've introduced is a concept called part initialization. What that allows me to do is at any point within my app when I suddenly need imports, I just put them on the class, in this case the main page, which we saw before, main page. And then in the constructor or in the load event, I call part_initializer.satisfy imports. That's all I have to do. Once I do that, MEF will do everything it needs to. In the case of Silverlight, it will take all of the assemblies in the current ZAP by default, and it will pick all the exports and things that are up within that particular assembly and make them available, and it just works. And I'm going to show you that it just works. So that's it. That's the first three concepts. So let's go and build that. And one of the things I want you to pay attention to as I'm building this app is that how much of it is actually MEF. So here I've got my main page, and if we look in my main page, I'm going to start off with a single items control. Top widgets. Top widgets is going to be where my widgets are going to initially appear. Now, you noticed I said we had two. We're going to start with one, and then we'll move to two. OK. So the first thing we're going to do is just go and add a user control. Sorry, wrong one. Let me use this mouse because it's up here. And I'm just going to, nothing fancy, I'm just going to use the built-in .NET templates, Visual Studio templates, and I'm just going to call it widget 1. Now, on widget 1, I'm just going to put some boilerplate XAML in here, which is just a button, nothing special there. Now I'm going to go to my code, And I want to make this thing available as a user control to MEF. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an export attribute. I'm going to specify the type. Once I do that, things are going to go haywire because I don't have a using statement. So everything in MEF lives in the system component model.composition namespace, and that's the assembly. So I have this project was pre-created, but just to let you know that there's not a lot of magic that was done here, I've added two binaries, system component model.composition and system component model.composition.initialization, which is what gives us the part initialization stuff. Okay, so I've added this export. And now what I want to do is I want this guy to also be able to import a message. So I'm going to put that message there. Now, that's just a property. One of the things MEF allows you to do when you're importing is you can use parameters or constructor parameters, or you can use properties. Here I'm using properties. And I'm specifying what the contract is, hellomef.message. And it's just a property, and I'm setting that property so it's going to set the content of the button once the setter is called. The last thing I'm going to do, which I really don't have to do, but it's just for the heck of it, is I'm going to add a button click. So we're done on our export side. That's what it took to build our simple extension. All MEF really cared about at this point was just the export and the import. Didn't care about anything else other than that. We also had our message. So for the message, I've got some pre-canned code here. I will show it to you so you know it's not that much. It's just saving time here. This guy just has a field. So MEF does not limit you to just exporting types. You can actually have exports on members. For example, I can't subclass string to put an export on it. So what can I do? I can either create a property, which might run some custom logic to return that string for me, like call to a configuration store, or what I can do is just simply put it on a field, as I've done here. The last piece is we need to import the widgets in our main page. So the first thing we'll do is we'll add in our widgets import. So we'll make it an IEnumerable of user control. And we'll just call it widgets. Nope. That doesn't work yet. Maybe that'll be an FX5. You'll be able to put a try there. And then we're going to put an import many. And in this case, I'm not going to actually specify the type because you don't need to. And then the last thing I'm going to do is embed my part initializer call. And finally, add the logic that will loop through my widgets. Which is that missing? That is missing. Okay, we'll just do it. And then we have top widgets dot items dot add widget. Let's compile. One of the things you'll notice is I didn't put an export on my class. So when you use part initializer, you can't. Part initializers are basically is saying I am the root object. I don't have to be the only root object in the application. It could be that I'm just a user control, but somebody else created me. Basically, what part initializer is for is somebody else created me. In the case of user controls living in XAML, that is the XAML parser. But it might even be some third-party library that you're using that uses activator.createInstance to instantiate stuff, and you just say, well, I still want to use MEF. With part initializer, you can. So if I didn't royally screw up, this should work. And it does. So how did that look? Did that look complicated or intuitive? What was your feeling? Now, all of this is in the singles app. That may be okay for you. Depending on the size of your app, initially that may be fine. But what this is giving me is the ability to just add new things simply by creating a class, adding it in my project. And you may say, well, I'm writing code. Yeah, you're writing code, but you're not having to modify existing code, which might break. Your test team will be very happy, if test teams are happy. Just to prove that this is what I just said, let's go now and add another widget. So this time, I will save you the boring watching me type, and we'll just go at it. It's pretty much the same guy. The only difference is this guy has a text box, and he doesn't have the event, which, by the way, I didn't click the button to show you how that works. He's still got the message. Let's run him. So there you go. Test team didn't have to do any retesting. All I did was just add a class file. I just tell them, look, here it is. I just added it. That's it. I could have put it in a separate assembly if I wanted to, still in the Zap. It all works because what MEF will do is, Silverlight has a packaging story. It sends down a Zap, which is like a zip file, that has within it several assemblies that have a manifest. So anytime you add a reference, that assembly is going to show up within that Zap. That means that the first time you call part initializer, it will be there. This is what we mean by saying that MEF is ready to go at any time. But what we did here was basically just do a single widget. Let's see how we could we did multiple widgets, but we had a single items control. What happens if I want to have two? What do I have to do? Do I have to now say, well, I can't just use user control anymore because I got to have something else, like user control top, user control bottom. That's kind of annoying. Over time, I'm going to want to add new things. I don't have to keep shipping people new libraries. Fortunately, MEF actually has a solution to that. Let's see. You can be different with MEF. Your parts can be different and unique, and they can describe themselves, and they don't have to get created until you've made a decision that you want to create them. But they can give you enough info so you can decide whether I want to let you in the gate or not, or tell you which door you need to go in. In this case, the door would be a top and a bottom area of the screen. So how do I do that? Well, this is where the concept of metadata in MEF is something that we think is extremely powerful for these kind of applications. So before you saw I exported simply a user control. What MEF allows you to do is attach arbitrary metadata. In this case, I'm saying I want to add a location to my widget. And that location is basically going to specify where it's going to go. It's going to either go to the top or it's going to go to the bottom. This is very simple here. I just have a single value, but I could have lots of values. Then on the import side, we have a type called lazy. What lazy is a new type in the framework. It ships in .NET 4.0 and it ships in Silverlight 4. Basically what it is a lazily activated instance. Once it's activated, it will always return the same value. What we've done in the MEF team is we've extended that and added a lazy of t. So lazy is lazy of t. We've added lazy of t metadata. And what metadata allows me to do is have views that I can define of the types of information that you need to be able to cross my gate. And if you don't provide that information, you're not getting in. So it means I don't even have to write the code. If I ask you for a piece of information and you don't have your proper papers, like my friend Ariel here from Israel can confirm, you're not crossing the border. Okay. Let's not go to that. So let's just take a look at how that looks. And what I'm going to do here is just for sake of time, because I want to make sure we get to cover everything. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Oh, you didn't see what I was doing, so hold on a second there. Widget 1, widget 2, Yep, I will switch over right now. Thank you. So we're just going to run this version of the app. So now we're back to our 2 widgets. I just didn't want to sit here and build it for you because that'll be kind of boring. But let's see how it works. That's the important point. So as I showed you before, if I go to my widget now, the XAML hasn't changed. It's the exact same XAML. In code, I've added this thing called export metadata, which says, here's my metadata. It's arbitrary. The key is location. I've also specified this thing called widget location. Is that something that we shipped with MEF? No. MEF lets you define your own language. What are the things that are important to you in your particular domain? So I can create an enum called widget location. I can use that as part of my metadata, which is what you saw. I defined top and bottom. So if I look at widget 2, you can see that he's going to the bottom, where widget 1 is going to the top. I've also defined this interface called iWidget metadata. One of the things we've done in MEF, we have kind of a pseudo duck typing for metadata. Metadata, I can have arbitrary metadata that an export provides, and as an importer, I can decide which pieces of metadata are interesting to me. I can do that by defining an interface, and we will generate a proxy for you over that interface. You'll see what that means in a second. It basically means you don't have magic strings all over the place in the internals of your app, and you get compile time checking, which means you can do some really nice link queries, which we'll see in a second. Also, what it does is automatically filter out those exports that don't have that. So if I haven't provided location, and I'll show you that right now. So let's go to our widget 2, and let's just drop setting this metadata here. Watch what happens. He's gone. You did not provide me the metadata I requested. And how did I request it? Simply by defining a property in my interface. He's gone. So that gives me a lot of flexibility that I don't have to write all that code. I can simply define different views. Think of these metadata as views over the different things that are available and use the ones that are appropriate to me within my application context that I'm at now. Now, that's a lot of words. So let's see what that looks like in code. How did this change for the importer? We already saw the code, but let's just see the whole thing in action so you can see where the benefits of the IntelliSense really come in. All right. So same code I had. The difference is, if I scroll down a bit, that now I'm using this lazy import. I'm saying user control is still the type or the contract, but iWidget metadata, which is my interface that I defined, is what I want you to use to determine the filtering. Not only do I want you to use that to determine the filtering, I need that information as part of my processing, if you want to call 2 lines of code processing. Here, look at my for each. My for each for my widgets now, instead of now getting a widget object, I get a wrapper, a lazy wrapper. That means the thing hasn't even been created yet. I can make a decision. If I have like a large number of exports that are out there, the cost of this is minimal because those things didn't actually get created just for me to look at them. So I don't have to now add all kinds of properties to my instances to then create them and check, are you the one that I want? And then I have to get really complex if I want to delay the cost of creating that thing. I might have to create a proxy to a proxy to a proxy, which we all love doing, right? But the logic is really simple here. I've now gone on to the metadata object, and the metadata object is now the proxy of the type that I specified for the view. So I get a nice location property there. So now I'm getting IntelliSense. I'm getting compile time checking. If it doesn't exist on that metadata view, the code's not going to compile as far as the view itself. And now I'm just simply taking the logic to decide, do you go up, do you go down? I don't have to use an enum. I could have used strings if I wanted to as the value, but I wanted to drive home the benefits that you have here. So how does that look? Really difficult? Damn. So we've just seen a bunch of things. We've seen the basics of MEF. We've seen how we can define exports, we can define imports. 95% of your time, that's what you care about. Actually, 99% of your time, that's what you're going to focus on as a developer who's using MEF. What are the places that I want to allow things to be brought into my system? What do I want those things to look like? And then I just go do it. And I may have to call this part initializer thing every once in a while. That's fine. It lets me use it wherever I want to use it. If I want to, I can go further. That's turning up the dial and say, well, I don't want to just get the whole collection. I want to do something with it. I may want to get a subset, so I can do a link query. I don't have to do what I did there where I looped through everything. I can just do a .where and filter and say, I'm only interested in this subset right now for this customer, for this part of the system, for this license that the customer has, whatever the case may be. It's arbitrary. And then I can access that metadata, decide what I want to do with it, and then create those things. And all of that I can do relatively easy. By it being easy, though, does that mean that it's not valuable, right? Easy doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Although it does mean that, you won't have as many consultants sitting there saying, well, you've got to pay us to show you how to do this. I love consultants, so no offense, but SAP is a good example of where Okay, and I have nothing against SAP. But, so this is a very simple example. Let's take a look at something a little bit more real world. Now, with a name like Contoso Sales, you're probably saying, oh, that's supposed to be real world? So no, it's not a real application. As a matter of fact, it should look similar to something you've seen that our man, the Goo, showed in his PDC talk. Why I chose that app is not, I think it's a pretty cool app, and for one thing, it's got the designer hand on it. I had nothing to do with, I couldn't make this app look anything like this. Just dropping a quick plug for Silverlight, I saw what it looked like before it was restyled. It was literally 3 list boxes and a button. So kudos to the WPF and Silverlight team for making this kind of thing possible and making me as a developer not have to try to become a designer. Let the designers do the work they want to do. But the important thing here is this is an existing application. Think of it like one of your apps that you have. And now I wanted to go and say, well, customers that are using this app are telling me, there's a lot of things we'd like to do related to a selected contact. We might want to look up their LinkedIn profile. We might want to push to, we want to push to email. We want to integrate with our line of business system, PeopleSoft. So when I'm selecting the customer here, I can pull the contact, I can pull some related information out of that. And so it makes sense to be able to do that really easily. We're not at the point yet where we're talking about the customer necessarily adding this. Our dev team's doing it, but it's just going to be easier. So this app here actually has that. I went in, and I'll show you how I did it. And you can see I have this actions here. So I can go and say, I want to add Kevin Fink to my Google contacts. That goes out through a web service and does a bunch of stuff. But the point is, there he is. I did that without having to rip open my app. The extension brought all the information it needed to be able to talk to that web service. Yes, I had to deploy some things on the server. Unfortunately, they decided not to use MEF on the server, so they had to retest and do all this other stuff. But if they had been using MEF on the server, they could have even added that web service simply as just a drop-in deployment type thing, and it would have just worked. Now, that's kind of interesting. But we talked about metadata, and metadata is really powerful. And one of the places it becomes really interesting when you're working with Silverlight is the fact that these applications have different states. They go online, they go offline, they go out of browser, they go in browser. And we know there's different capabilities available each time that happens. So with MEF, you can actually leverage that metadata to make those extensions that are context sensitive to the state of the app. So here you can see that my actions list has that Google export, right? Because I might be running on another platform, for example, that supports Silverlight, because we do run on, say, the Mac. Let's go kill our connection. Actually, I'll need to pull the plug too. So when I do that, I'm hovering on the actions. You see it's empty. That thing just went away because I'm not online. So it's gone. That's kind of cool. But, you know, I got this out-of-browser thing, and with Silverlight 4, that opens a whole world of stuff, especially if I'm running in elevated mode. So let's go take this app into the world of out-of-browser. Oh, what do we have there? Add to Outlook, display in Outlook, something that should only be available when I'm running elevated in an out-of-browser mode. Does it work? That is the question. So let's take David Yardy, good old David. Let's go add him to Outlook. It's going. It's not going to fail me now. You know, I want to see him. There you go. So from Silverlight, I've now been able to take advantage of our new COM interop to pull in from Outlook. Pretty cool, I think. But the important point here is the part that MEF played. I really was able to use that metadata to get the subset of extensions that I needed at a point in time. I also want to show you, though, that taking this existing application and MEFicizing it was actually quite simple. I didn't have to do a lot. I didn't have to change a lot of existing code. So let's take a look at what that meant. So the first thing I did was I had to add a menu. I'm not going to bother showing that. That's just, DevExpress has this great free menu. We unfortunately don't have one in Silverlight. I personally do not like that at all, but that does not necessarily represent the view of my employer. Put that menu in, and now I want to use it. Well, the first thing is everything in this app revolves around the contacts view. That's that screen that you see on the inside. By the way, this is also a RIA services app. So MEF is just an assembly. You can use it in anything. You don't have to worry about, oh, I want to use the MEF template and the RIA services template and the entity framework. You don't have to deal with any of that. Just bring it in where you need it. So in this case, I wanted to make this really easy and non-invasive. So the only code I actually had to add to an existing file, you're looking at it right here. I had to go into my contacts class, and I added an import on this thing called an action menu service. This is a single import. It's not something I'm expecting people to replace. That's why I'm not using an interface. I'm just using the concrete class. Nobody's even going to reference it. It's just for me. It's just to make my app really easy to add this stuff and not break other things. Then I'm calling part_initializer.satisfy imports. Now remember, this is that principle of anywhere you need it. My app has a main page and a bunch of other stuff, and it's using RIA services to navigate. And finally, it's coming to this contacts page. But that guy decides, uh-oh, I need some things from MEF. Well, what does he do? He adds the import. He calls part_initializer, satisfy imports. He's done. Last thing he does is he calls this initialize method, which passes in references to the action menu item, and the store context. Pretty cool stuff. Usable. Just to take a quick look at what that other class is doing, I'll pop it open. What this guy is doing is he's going to be responsible for importing the actions from MEF. Nice thing about collections with MEF is you can create custom collections that do special things, and MEF will still work with them happily. As long as they implement IEnumerable or as long as they implement iList or iCollection, MEF is happy to work with them. It will push into them. What we've done here is we've created an application state-aware collection. It's just a collection that does a special thing. It inherits from this reusable thing called an adapting collection that we'll be blogging about. Anybody could write this. It's not a MEF thing. It's just a collection with an adapt method that lets you write some custom logic. Think of it as like a view over a collection. It's not ADO.NET, it's not bound to data. It's just you give me any collection that you want to apply a filter to, and you can create something that derives from it and apply your own filter. And my filter here is saying I'm going to look at the metadata, right? Because I'm expecting that I'm going to get a lazy I'm expecting that, yeah, I'm going to get a lazy T of M where M is this, implements these two interfaces. And those two interfaces are the ones that are defining the requires out of browser and requires online properties. So then what I can do is use that information and just use the APIs provided to me in Silverlight to check whether or not the thing is online or offline and apply the filter here. And there you go. Simple. I listen to the state changes. When the state changes happen, the collection's going to repopulate, reapply the filter. End of story. One thing we didn't talk about, which I want to make sure we cover, is the fact that of all these attributes. So this slide here, we have this export metadata location. We saw on the import side, it's nice. I get IntelliSense compile time checking. The export side is kind of a little ugly. I've got these magic strings. What happens if I have multiple values? I could have multiple different pieces of metadata, like requires out of browser, et cetera. So what we're seeing really is that this, we don't like it. And we heard this. We heard this feedback from lots of people. So we said, you know, one thing is to say, well, we could get rid of attributes. We're actually going to provide a way. MEF under the hood, I'm not going to show it to you now, but you'll see a blog post, actually doesn't care about attributes at all at its low levels. But for the discovery model, we actually think attributes is the right choice. It makes it very easy to interrogate code that you don't trust and see what's available and make decisions. But this is not very usable. It requires me to know too much. I want something really nice. I want my own attribute, like widget. And then I can bake in properties for the things I want you to provide me. And guess what? You can do that with MEF. That was something we heard a lot of feedback from customers on, and we fortunately were able to get that in. So all of our attributes are unsealed. You can create an export, your own exports, you can create your own imports, you can do whatever you want. Why that's nice in this case is if I look at my extensions, and just to show you guys how easy using the new managed interop stuff is, here's my add contact to Outlook guy. And the interesting part, oh, thank you, would be if you could see the screen. Now, I decided to call this guy export contact action. You notice in the slide I used widget. It's really up to you. There's a nice thing when you prefix your custom attributes with export. They show up very nicely in IntelliSense. That's up to you if you want to use that or not. But the important thing here is that this guy asks me for the information I need through IntelliSense. So he asks me for a title that I must provide, which is a required parameter on the attribute. And he lets me provide other information, optionally, like requires online, requires out of browser. I'm sure you can think of other ways to use this. I don't want you to think that metadata is only useful for this particular scenario. It's useful for way more than that. Now let's take a look at what it took to create that attribute. So here I have a contracts assembly because I'm expecting I would ship this to somebody. That's it. That's the attribute. That's the realm of complexity. The MEF parts are one that this guy inherits from export attribute. He's implementing this interface, iAction metadata. We only did that to enforce that he must have that. You don't have to do that. MEF will still give you the strong typing and IntelliSense and everything else. That's just a convenience for me. Okay, we're running out of time here, and we've got a bunch of other stuff to show. So I want to just show you one quick other thing. trim up your apps, break up your zaps. So what we saw here, this is that fat cat. We saw here that we had this single zap that had everything in it. We want to be able to break that up. Oh, oops, preview. So you can do that with MEF. Right now, the way you do that is using something that we're shipping in the Silverlight toolkit called the package catalog. We're hoping to get that into Silverlight Core, but you're using all of what's in MEF and you're just using an add-on that right now we're shipping in the toolkit. Let me show you what that allows us to do. So what I have here is a house planner application. I only bought the Express version. Well, I didn't buy it. I just downloaded the Express eval. It's kind of lame. It just lets me put a box on the page. Can't really do much with it. But it's shipping with a small package, so woohoo for small size. But then I find out I can go on the website and I can put my credit card and say, you know, I think I'm ready for an upgrade. It's not that expensive. And once I do that, and if you look down here, find it. Where is it? I've got these two zaps that this app is designed to allow me to get on demand. So I'm going to go get the House Planner Services zap. Once I did that, woohoo, now I can actually move the shape and I can rotate it. That was a worthy upgrade. Unfortunately, all I can do is drop additional boxes, which is not that useful. So then I decide, all right, you've whet my appetite enough. I think I'll go the extra level. I'll run that credit card again. Well, now I get a whole different picture. Whole new sets of shape libraries, whole new sets of floor plans. You know, I can now put a desk there. I can draw a single office apartment. I still have that additional ability to do these services. So this is stuff that was delivered on demand. For shortness of time, this sample is going to be made available. We're going to put it out there on Codeplex. We have a new thing called the package loader. Using the package loader APIs allows you to load zaps dynamically. The interesting thing that's going on here, though, that I have to show you is the fact that MEF has a thing called recomposition. And what recomposition means is we've designed MEF with the notion that when it composes, that's not a static composition. Other things might show up in the future, and you can design your apps such that they expect to receive new things. And when those new things show up, automatically, MEF will take care of business for you. You don't have to write your own eventing mechanisms and things like that. Those collections of things will just automatically get updated if you've opted in to allow that update. So if we look at our planning pane, I can see that my planning pane is importing this element rotation service, as an example. When I run the first time, sorry, why is the breakpoints are not working here? Let's try rebuilding. It's weird. When I run the first time, I can see that element moving service is null. But if you look what's special here, on the import I've said I'm allowed to be recomposed. Means when new things show up, I want to know about it. And I'm also allowed to have a default value, default of t of null. What that means is MEF, it's okay that this import's not there. I've designed for it. What MEF will do that's special is if allowed default is false, that part just goes away. And what that allows you to do some very interesting things. For example, if you want to have parts that depend on a certain license being present, if that license is not present, those features are just gone. You have to write that manual code that checks everywhere. Is the feature, does this person have this license? This is something that Visual Studio, for example, uses, which also uses MEF. But when I run this application, and then I go and say, go get me the moving and rotation services, the first thing you can see is it's calling this package downloader, and it's passing in a URI. House-based planner services.zap. Then the package is getting received. I'm adding it to a package catalog. I'm not going to go into what that is, but it's a couple of lines of code to set it up. Once I do that, automatically now that element service was updated. You can look at the call stack here. There's no magic 50 lines of code that I wrote to do that synchronization. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up Ariel Ben-Horish. One of the hot items that people have been asking about with MEF is how does this relate to Prism? How many people here know what Prism is? Cool. So Ariel, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Glenn, for inviting me to be here. I'm going to really make this thing quick so we have more time. So I'm going to introduce you to an approach we've done to integrate MEF and Prism together. So the notion around this idea is to keep your existing Prism application, like all the stuff you know, all the stuff that you code already are already there. Don't need to change a thing. And we want to extend this application to be able to get plugins from outside. So we use MEF to locate and discover those plugins. And we use the IOC container you use in your Prism application to create the dependencies and roll on the plugins and do the stuff. So let me just show you my sample here. I'm going to close this down. OK, let's put this on. No, don't want to. OK. So what you're going to see is a Silverlight application built with Prism. Basically, it's an Xbox games browser. So
This sample he took based on Sean Wildermuth's
example
that he put in the MSDN article on Prism and Silverlight, if any of you have seen it. So it looks like it.
Yeah, it's with permission as well. So basically, we have a game browser on the left, which is a Prism module, and we have in the middle section the details of each game, and I can go here and save stuff. This is what the Prism is doing. But I have also here a special module that drive plugins inside. So when I hit it, I can go and see plugins I have in the server, like a map plugin, for example. Still offline, right? Yeah. Yeah. OK, so let's just press F5 again and load this stuff. So we use here Bing Maps, which needs to be online to use it. OK, here we go. So with this app, I completely put a plugin inside. It was not part of the original application. But as you can see, this plugin is consistent with your own Prism modules. It uses their own event aggregator and region manager, and can do all the stuff that modules can. But
correct me if I'm wrong, Ariel, you didn't have to modify any of the existing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I can choose another plugins and create new plugins on the fly and just push it down to the client. So this one showing Twitter, and if the bandwidth will allow it, we will get stuff. Okay. So this is basically a very interesting approach. Glenn, in the end of the show, will tell you how you can get the sample and the library itself. So thank you very much.
Okay, so Ariel has made this into a reusable library that you can pull into your Prism applications, play with. This is an exploration that he's been doing. And he's made it so that it's not coupled to any IOC container in the Prism spirit. And he's only using MEF for a very simplified case of the discovery. He's saying MEF is great for discovery here, but I want Unity to own everything else. And he's introduced a registration model so that instead of your modules pulling in a container and having to call register and everything else, they declaratively are able to express, here's the things I have available, but yet Unity is the guy who creates everything in the Prism world. MEF is used for a point in time. This is just one path. There's probably about 76 to Prism and MEF integration. No, there's about 5 reasonable paths you can go depending on your scenarios, and we're going to be exploring that more. Thank you very much, Ariel. Okay. Well, skipped over the slides. Let's move past that. That's just describing how that's done. Quick. Come on. Okay. So just in summary, before I talk about where I can get it, we've talked about how we can use MEF both for ourselves and for our customers. We can use MEF to open it up so that customers can create their own things. We can come up with various ways of doing that. We can come up with conventions with ZAP names. We can come up with our own configuration mechanisms where as a customer I say, here's my ZAP, use it, and they can add their own things to the app. But even if that's not my case, I can use it just for me. We've also seen that in Silverlight I can use MEF anywhere, anytime that I need it. And hopefully we've seen that getting going with MEF is pretty easy, but it has a lot of power and I can scale it up as I need it. This ships as part of Silverlight 4. It is also available in the .NET Framework 4, and we have source available on Codeplex, which is Silverlight 3 compatible, as well as .NET 3.5 compatible. And MEF ships under an open source license. That's kind of interesting because if you wanted to use MEF on a different platform and take the code or something like that, you could, if that was something that was interesting. Anyway, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, of course it works on the Mac. Oh, we've got Jackson Harper with us. He's on the Mono team. He works on Moonlight. Any of you guys heard of Moonlight? So you might want to stay for another 2 minutes because he's going to show something pretty interesting. So Jackson Harper, everybody.
So Glenn, can we try running your MEF demo on my Mac that just happens to be plugged into the projector here? And also happens to
You're going to run my MEF demo?
Yes, this is one of the MEF demos that we downloaded from the Codeplex site. We didn't do any changes to it, and
So you didn't compile it. You just took the ZAP files.
exactly. All we did was
Is
put
that
it on
because
the
you couldn't
machine,
compile it?
bookmark it, and here it is. This is Glenn's Extensible grid demo. You can see it allows you to sort of reshape the grid using MEF. And that's cool, but this isn't really cross-platform, is it? This is just Silverlight on the Mac. It would be cool.
It's kind of cross-platform, right? The Mac is another platform.
It's not really cross-platform, Glenn.
What are you getting at? I don't.
What would be interesting is if there was another possibly open source implementation of Silverlight, such as the Mono project.
Interesting. I don't know why we'd want to support that.
So here we have the extensible grid running on a Linux box here. Hopefully, it's a little big for the screen. Let's see if. And I can pop it up, and just like on the Mac and just like on your Windows computer, I'll be able to restyle it and cross our fingers, see it run in Moonlight.
Thank you very much, Jackson. And we're very excited about the fact that we were able to release MEF under an open source license. Another person in Ariel's company has gone and built MEF for the compact framework. Benaya, why don't you stand up? He's taken MEF and taken the code and ported it to work on compact. So this is groundbreaking for Microsoft. It's awesome to see this kind of stuff happening. And much thanks to Scott Gu, Brad Abrams, and Bob Muglia and Brian Goldfarb for making this kind of stuff possible. All right. So thank you very much. Appreciate your feedback. And I'll be around. I'll be in the Silverlight booth. I know we went to the end, but we'll be here for questions and other stuff. And go take MEF. We really love your feedback, and we do our best to incorporate it. And let us know. Thank you very much.